You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We love MotoGP. Hello and welcome to Missed Apex MotoGP Podcast. This is a show put together by MotoGP fans pretending to be experts. We aim to have a race review show ready for a midweek commute. We may just be punters, but we love to talk. Magnificent Mandalika served us up some stunning views, sweltering heat, controversy, and a new rookie victor in what was a brutal and bruising weekend for bodies and egos alike. As always, I am your host, Kyle Power, and today I'm joined in the virtual shed by some fellow MotoGP enthusiasts. It's our clog-wearing co-host, Jules Seegers. How's it going, Jules?
Thanks, Kyle. This season has so many races, it's hard to remember all of them, but I'm sure the Sunday race at Mandalika was the best of this season.
Ooh, controversial opinion. I reckon the sprint might have been just as good as well. We're also joined by tyre-obsessed trumpeter Matt Trumpets. How's it going, Matt?
I gotta say, I never expected a race so complicated that even I couldn't keep track of all the different tire combinations.
Absolutely. It was good. Well, I was glad you were trying to, because I didn't even bother to attempt that. But as it was a brilliant weekend of racing and a bit of controversy as well. So let's dive straight into it with the weekend overview. And after the championship success last week, it was a week of tributes for Mark. I think they've thoroughly milked that now, but there's some cool little videos go up on a YouTube, both done by TNT and the World Feed, so go and check them out. That was pretty good. We had some details emerged that Pecco Bagnaia used Frankie Morbidelli's GP24 in the Misano test, but Ducati semi-denied it, and this is all shrouded in mystery and odd denials from Ducati, but maybe a bit more on that later if we have time. Jorge Martin had successful surgery on his complex collarbone and shoulder injury, so hopefully he's back with us again soon. And quite poignantly, Michelin brought the heat-resistant rear casing tyre, the new harder sort of a heat-resistant casing rear tyre again this weekend, and this is only the third time it's been used this year, and it caused a bit of carnage. So, the standings. Marquez, that's irrelevant, the championship's already done, but all of the eyes should be on Bagnaia hunting down his brother Alex Marquez and the fight for third with Marco Bezzecchi. But, as we saw going into practice, Jules, it didn't start off very well for the Ducatis.
It was like, what's happening here? All of the Ducatis were struggling, and not in the least Marc Marquez himself. We saw him go down twice on the Friday. One looked pretty violent already. It wasn't a big high-sider, but it was a high-sider. And with Marc Marquez, you immediately look at, okay, on which side is it his left arm he's crashing on? It wasn't, luckily. But it was curious. Alex Marquez went down. A lot of guys went down. But more surprisingly, the Hondas were very quick, with Luca Marini actually topping the FP1, and both Hondas going through to Q2 directly in the Friday afternoon session. But maybe the biggest surprise of all that was that both Marc Marquez, Pecco Bagnaia were out. Was the first time Marc Marquez was out of Q directly qualifying for Q2. So that was a first one for this season. But also Alex Rins. I mean, we need to dust off his name almost.
Yeah, we've not been able to mention him, have we?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the first time we mentioned him this season. But he made it directly into Q2 together with Fabio Quartararo. So both the Yamahas and the Hondas were very quick on the Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was really weird. The grid was kind of like on its head, as you mentioned, Mark not getting through. I think after that second big crash where he had a big old impact he was just trying not to bin it again and had the weird tactic of following his teammate round Pecco, who was just all at sea. I don't know what was going on there. Yamaha's really quick. The KTMs, all apart from one, also looked completely at sea. Unfortunately, Maverick Vinales had to withdraw because of his ongoing shoulder problems still from that crash all the way back in the Sachsenring. And he said now he might actually sit out the rest of the season to get it healed. So probably a wise choice. But Acosta was looking very quick as well. And you mentioned the Ducatis were all struggling. There was one that wasn't, and that was Fermin Aldeguer, who oddly seemed to be to be really quick, because even Alex Marquez only just scraped directly through to Q2. He was 10th, and he actually knocked Mark out. It was him who knocked Mark out by a couple of thousandths, I think it was. So they're looking really, but there's one guy who was looking very dominant, Matt, and that was a certain Mr. Bezecchi.
Yeah, this would be the embodiment, this track, of everything that makes the Aprilia a fun bike to ride, and everything that Bezecchi has mastered over the course of a season about how to ride it best. But he was not the only Aprilia looking good, so it's a combination. We had Raul Fernandez out of nowhere showing up much better than we were used to seeing him. And I take it that Mandalika for me is upside down, topsy-turvy land. Everything is backwards. And I think just the combination of how the circuit is, and I love this, how the circuit is and the style required to be successful on it is exactly the opposite of everything that's made Ducati just a smothering presence on the grid. And it's a breath of fresh air to go to a track and suddenly see all the other bikes up there, with the exception of Bezecchi, who sort of has crept up in the last couple of races.
Yeah, totally. So he had it was looking like Bezecchi had almost half a second on the field at one point. So going into quali, into Q1, and I haven't watched Q1 that closely for quite a while, actually, because obviously it was just such an unusual, unprecedented scenario with both the factory Ducatis in. I don't think Bagnaia looked like getting through at any point, but Mark just about scraped through, and Digi came through with him as well. So, but they only just sort of scraped through. It wasn't that comfortable. So the GP25s, at least, not really working very well. But going into Q2, Bez, stunning lap. But Jules, the person who impressed me most was Mr. Aldeguer, because his first bike broke and he had to go out on his second bike.
Yeah, the first run he did in Q2, it wasn't all that impressive, and he was, I think, like P6, which was kind of off if you saw his Friday pace. I mean, Marco Bezecchi was on a different level. He was like Marquez level as opposed to the others this weekend in qualifying. It was almost half a second adrift. But going from the Friday, you'd expect Aldeguer to be on the front row, but it didn't look like it. He had to change to his other bike, but still then in the run 2, which was very chaotic, Alex Marquez crashed. Marc Marquez almost lost it. Alex Rins crashed and caused a very annoying yellow in the last couple of minutes, and he just kept staying there in the gravel trap to not cancel the yellow flag that was waved because of that.
Do you reckon that was a tactic to keep the yellows out to preserve his position?
I definitely think so. I mean, it was, as we said, it was the first time Alex Rins was in Q2 maybe this whole season, and then he was on P4, I think. So definitely he thought, I'm not going to rush this. I'm just going to try and see if I can get this motor going, pushing it through the gravel. But back to Aldeguer, somehow on his spare bike, he made it to P2 after all, and he was actually the only one really looking comfortable enough to kind of match Bezecchi's pace.
Yeah, so someone else who's an unfamiliar name in there as well, Matt, was Raul Fernandez, who stuck it on the front row, which is, wow, what a performance.
Yeah, he's been coming on really nicely. Like he's just been there. Fast rider, not a lot of results. And as the Aprilia has improved, and I think as Trackhouse has gotten himself together, and maybe just having Agura to push him a little bit at various points, although poor I is out with his injured hand, which, total side note, I think we had 19 riders start. Like, it's like they're dwindling. They're dwindling. The grid is dwindling rapidly at this end of the year. And I don't recall this happening last season, but maybe it did. But yeah, it's like, you're there, you're thereabouts, you're there, you're thereabouts. And then one day it all comes together. And for him on this track, it all came together. His style, the bike, and just the pace of the Aprilia was really, it was monstrous compared to all of the other bikes, with the exception, as you've already noted, of Aldeguer on the 24.
And then come to think, guys, they were the only two Aprilias active this weekend, right? Because Jorge Martin, he was out. Ayogura still decided he's not fit enough to ride. So there were only two Aprilias. Imagine if these guys would have been there. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Fernandez, it's his fourth season in MotoGP, I think. But I think a lot of guys would like rate Ogura higher than him already. And imagine Jorge Martin being there in a fit condition. I mean, they could have just like rolled up the whole field.
Yeah, totally. And it's good you mentioned Agura, actually, because, and also the Aprilia, so building on what Matt said as well, like the Aprilia seems to suit really well at this track. I think the Aprilia really seems to suit this strange Michelin, hard, more sort of heat-resistant rear tyre, because the last time they used it was in Austria, and it went really, and the Aprilias were going quite well there, sort of unexpectedly, but it was all the way back in round one when we saw it this season. And who was really spectacularly good, surprisingly, on the Aprilia in round one? It was Ayogura, and it was suited. So I think it's a real shame that he had to miss this round, and Jorge Martin, because the Aprilia could have got a massive haul of points here. So yeah, really interesting stuff. So Rins ended up fourth. Acosta ends up getting fifth. Marini sixth. Mir kind of botched up quali a little bit. Alex Marquez only seventh. Fabio Quartararo eighth, for the first time I think all season being out qualified by the magnificent Rins. And Mark could only salvage ninth with Digi in 10th, I think, or Digi was last in the session. So sets up a very interesting scenario for the sprint. Okay, so on to the sprint. And Jules, what should have been a lovely parade off for Bez was anything but.
Yeah, I mean, you thought that given Marco Bezzecchi's qualifying pace, that he would just, ride off onto the horizon and we'll never see him back again. But it wasn't the case at all. And we've seen this before this season from Aprilia, that their starts aren't as solid as you'd expect, especially from these experienced riders. So it was also almost a bit sloppy, like he wasn't like fully focused on nailing this, which I can imagine, but it kind of looked that way. And Bezzecchi dropped back to, I think, 8th position, 7th, 8th position, which is in a sprint that's not where you want to be at all, especially starting from pole. But he dropped back and it looked like, oh man, this is typically Bezzecchi, as we've seen him do so many times. Like great position to start from, or a great outlook, and then he somehow botches it.
Yeah, and then sort of Matt.
Did he botch it? Or is it an Aprilia problem? Because I got to say, not to give away too much for further down the road, but this was not a problem that went away in the next race at all. And you mention it. It didn't look like, I don't know, maybe it was. Maybe he just too much throttle, spun up the wheel, went nowhere. But I was really surprised he didn't get hit from behind. I mean, it was like someone just got rid of his whole shot device entirely, just like didn't function. And everyone else shot off the line and he just went backwards. And you're just sitting there going, okay, well, we have the Marc Marquez long lap rule whenever he gets pole. Maybe we need the disable Aprilia start mechanism rule whenever Bezzecchi gets pole, because it went on to be a pretty interesting thing to have happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're both right. It didn't look like anything went wrong. He didn't spin up. He didn't do anything. From what I heard on the onboard, it sounded like there was just way too much clutch slip. It was really weird. It's like the clutch was slipping. It was really, really odd. They don't really feed the clutch in. They essentially just dump the clutches now and just go. So it was a very odd start. But somebody who didn't have that problem was Mr. Mark, who shot up to 6th place. And then we were just saying how good Rins was doing. He was looking all very good. And Jules, what's your take on the Marquez punt, shall we call it?
Like it was avoidable. Like after winning the title, we were all going like, okay, what is this going to do to Marquez's riding? Is he gonna like be all relaxed now, and is he gonna be even more, deadly on his bike? Is he gonna ride off into the distance, or is he maybe letting things loose a bit? But I didn't expect this Marc Marquez, like, making such an judgment error, so to say. And especially it was harsh on Rins because being there finally in that position. So I didn't expect him to misjudge it like that. And it almost felt like he was, I don't belong here in P6, P7. I'm going to make up ground as soon as I can. And what I wasn't impressed by was how this incident was like kind of evaluated afterwards by the media, and it was almost like, oh yeah, a shame this had to happen to Mark because he dropped down the packing order because of this, and I was like, yeah, but what about Rins? What about this guy? So I felt if that had been any other rider, for instance, Jorge Martin, who who shoved
He
off his
made a
own.
much worse mistake and harpooned his teammate.
That was a worse mistake. I mean, Alex Rins didn't go down, etc. But I felt like, we don't need to uh, handle Marc Marquez with soft gloves and kind of smooth talk everything that he might do wrong.
Was
I mean,
this on the Dutch comms? Because I think on the world feed, I think everyone was just like, yeah, it's just made a complete Horlicks of that and punted Rins pretty much.
it wasn't necessarily on the Dutch comms. I just felt afterwards that I like it when we try to judge these riders in the same way. And I felt if this had been anybody else, it would have been a lot more about how much of an error this was. And I kind of like to react to the narrative or the mood or the vibe. I don't know the exact right word, that Marc Marquez can't do anything wrong
I
nowadays
didn't
because
pick
he's,
up on that at all.
yeah, maybe it's a sensitive spot
I don't know, maybe is he
from
just a
my end.
hater, Matt? Is he just a hater?
He's just absolutely a hater. Thank you for letting us know that, Jules. We appreciate it. No, I like
Very joking.
I think you're the best person to pick, because they always say, like, hey, if you're trying to judge a situation, like reverse the participants or change the participants and see if you have the same reaction. So the easy one to do here is Frankie Morbidelli. What would you have reacted if Morbidelli did that? And if your reaction
Good
would be
one.
exactly the same, then you've certainly judged Mark fairly for this. From my personal point of view, and maybe it's just years of watching motorsports through timing screens and it generally mostly ignoring the comms, it looked clumsy. It looked awkward. It's not a mistake you would expect him to make, but then, and this is where I feel like sometimes things are different that don't always get flagged up immediately. But then he's on, obviously, his bike not working at all like it normally does. So he's fighting all of his instincts and he's not getting the performance he expected. And they're on those tires with the casings that also make it behave unusually. And so, was he reckless? Or was it just he expected the bike to do a thing, a bike didn't do a thing, and Rins was the one who paid the price for it? He got a penalty for it. I'm sure if you ask him about it, he would say the exact same thing. Yep, it was 100% on me. I made a mistake at that speed, at this time in the season, flying all over the world. Yeah, occasionally, as a human being, I don't get everything perfect.
Yeah, to be fair, Jules, he did totally own it and said it deserved a penalty, which he just took immediately. And he was like, yeah, but I think he tried to explain it somehow.
Yeah, and I totally agree with Matt. I mean, it's a long season. It was hot. He has probably had a week of partying and all kinds of media obligations. Maybe what I'm trying to say is because you guys also just reacted or responded to me in a bit of a way like, he's a hater, or let's bring out the tinfoil hat, or the conspiracies. But I think we should be able to criticize every rider or praise every
Oh,
rider.
absolutely.
And we should also be able to criticize Marc Marquez without immediately shoving that into the corner of, you think in conspiracies, or you're a VR46 guy, or you're a tinfoil hat. I mean, there's a whole lot of space between criticizing someone and in this case Marc Marquez and being in that far end.
Yeah, it's a pretty well-known phenomenon that people who are considered superstars or champions can be judged by a slightly different yardstick. So I take your larger point. We should be on our guard to not let him get away with things that we would hold other riders more accountable for. But I'm not convinced that was the case this time from the coverage that I saw.
Yeah, fair play.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I said, to be fair to him, he totally owned it. He went to Rins, and it was Rins actually who said he was really angry with Mark at first, super angry, and then he saw it. He said he got a bit sucked in with Marini. Something that I saw, which I thought was a mitigating factor as well. Like, he went in, he overcommitted. It was a dumb mistake. He was a bit too ambitious and overcommitted, and maybe, dare I say it, desperate, because the bike wasn't working. As sort of Matt said, he was a little bit desperate going in. It would have been okay, I think. And then you see he just slightly loses the rear kicks out, and he has to pick the bike up, and that's when he dinks Rins. So really, really unfortunate for Rins mainly. So Mark takes a long lap, takes his long lap immediately. I thought he's got like 1 or 2 laps to do it. I thought he would have done that to try and let the field spread, but just took it immediately, dropped down to 13th. And then basically, while this is happening, we'll talk about him a bit now. Like, his teammate Bagnaia is having a mare. He's dropped down to last place. And we'll very briefly touch on Bagnaia now, because I don't think we're going to have time later. So he drops back to last place, ends up finishing the sprint last, like 13 seconds behind Rins, who's been punted off, 30 seconds behind Bezzecchi. Jules, what the hell?
Yeah, it was just. I mean, what's left to say about this? He doesn't understand it. I don't think Ducati understand it. The journalists at the spot don't understand it. I mean, it's an enigma. And the only thing that I thought today, after reading up on some of the reports and listening to some journalists who were there, is that, I mean, Pecco Bagnaia has had a lot of hits this season. He took a lot of them on the chin, and without saying that it's to his own doing, or he should do better, or Ducati should do better, he took a lot of hits. Where either way you explain it or blame someone for it, and then to get there where he was last weekend, to like totally dominate this after a test that was positive for him, apparently, and just totally dominate the whole weekend. I mean, the relief that must have been for him, like, I'm not crazy. It's not me. It was that bike all along.
Yeah.
And to, get on that same bike a week later and experience this, I can totally imagine that mentally you can't charge yourself again to go through this all again, to go through such a weekend all again. And as we just said about the Marc Marquez incident, these guys are probably just tired, and I imagine that he's tired in a whole different way too. And this was just it for him.
Yeah, so I want to jump in on this. I mean, if you're going to sit there and we're going to look at last week and see his performance on that bike, and we're going to conclude that whatever else was going on, Pecco, the rider, possesses the same elan, the same class, the same quality that has made him a multiple world champion. okay, if he can climb on a bike and dominate a weekend last weekend, and he shows up and this happens, why are we even thinking it has anything to do with Pecco the rider? It doesn't have anything to do with him. If you look at his performance, if you look at the bike, and now I'm going to reference the race a little bit because that's where he crashed. I saw a little replay.
Oh yeah, let's do the whole Pecco bit now.
I remember seeing it too. Like, oh, there's chatter. You could see the rear wheel and the front wheel trying to murder each other right before he lost it. So he was not being uncommitted. He was not just, as we used to say, pussyfooting around in the back to get to the end. He was trying to wring every last bit of performance out of that bike he could. However, it's not the 24. Whatever else that bike is, it is definitely not entirely the 24. And everything that worked and was good last week that fed into how Ducatis have to be ridden at almost every track. Well, if you ride it like this at this track with no two hard braking zones, it's a flowing track. The highest temperatures we've seen, like the track was up near 60 C on a tire that we already know the 25 absolutely hates. Are you really that surprised? I mean, wasn't really that much faster than him in qualifying, and he's been a little more on it with the 25. We don't know the variants. Doesn't matter. A bike that's going to be fantastic in last week's conditions was going to be terrible in this week's conditions. And so I'm not that surprised by it.
No, to an extent. I mean, as a rider, yes, like you then have to adapt and get the most out of what you have. And they said apparently at the start of the week, and Pecco said it himself, this was exactly the same spec from Motegi when they went back and used some 24 parts, but minus one important thing. At Motegi, he could use the favoured 355mm massive front brake disc, which he loved at Aragon. And of course here, as Matt rightfully said, there's hardly any big braking zones. Like you can't use that disc again. So that's the only thing that changed. And Pecco basically said he was a passenger, but he was struggling. Digi was getting some out of it. Mark actually found something in the warm-up and was riding around the problems. But where is the problem? Yes, the bike didn't look good. And his slip-off was just like, it looked very reminiscent of the one he had at Silverstone at Luffield. And it was just like this pathetic front and rear tyres go simultaneously. And it just pretty much just fell off the side of the bike. It is really, really odd crash, and Silverstone was oddly slippy. So he's been really struggling with this. He struggled in Austria when he had this rear tyre carcass, remember, and plummeted there. I feel sorry for him, and because we thought, we were praising it, how he's found the answer. Finally, we're like, how are the solutions here finally? And yeah, absolute disaster. As Jules said, this must be taking its mental toll, and it so much so that after Sunday, Ducati didn't send him to do his press duties because they were protecting him, saying they needed to, they need to protect him, Matt. So I think some of it's the bike, but also as a rider, is some of the blame going to Pecco for not being able to adapt to the bike that's not perfect to him and to this situation? Because it's just bizarre to see this wild drop off in performance.
Yeah, I agree with you. It very clearly, perhaps, delineates his absolute limits as a rider, but he's still a rider on that bike capable of dominating everyone, including his teammate, on supposedly the newest spec of the bike. So the answer to me is it comes back to the bike. In the wrong circuit, in the wrong circumstances, he was behind Chantra. I was like, oh my God, this has got to be Chantra's lifetime. I'm going to beat Bagnaia in a race. And but if it ain't working and you're at your limit, then you've extracted everything you can extract. You have to get on with it. If I'm Ducati, I'm telling Pecco, yeah, you know what? We don't understand it either, but we're looking at the data and it's not you. Because the one thing you want him to have, you just tell him, look, when we get to the next Motegi, you're going to have that will be back for you. It's just the circuit and the tire. It's just not working. We couldn't make it work. That's on us.
Yeah.
Go home and get some rest. We'll see you at Phillip Island.
Yeah, Ducati are not helping themselves with being so cryptic in all of the interviews and not telling him. And then Pecco's getting frustrated because he said, I'm just going to stop answering the questions. We could talk about this all day. I think we've talked about it a lot. Most of the season, we seem to have massive topics. So let's wrap up the Bagnaia thing then, because we are actually in the middle of a sprint race review here at the moment. But before we get Bagnaia done and moved out of the way, and hopefully we get some more clarity coming around the Phillip Island, because I think we can do a whole show about the Bagnaia struggles this year, because it is a total enigma. So whilst all this Bagnaia misery was going on, there is a mega sprint developing with Bez down to 8th, Mark's down to 13th again, and done his long lap penalty. It's Aldeguerri gets the whole shot basically, and is flying away in the lead. And like, Jules, did you think there was any way back for Bez at this point?
That's a good question. Did I think that would? I mean, he had so much overspeed regarding the other riders. So, but still, it's a sprint. I mean, and the Mandalika, it's a relatively short lap. So no, not really. I mean, we've seen this season over and over again that leading a race and being at the front, that's easy. But being in the pack, it can be so hard to like really follow. And Mandalika has like maybe 1 or 2 places to overtake. So, I mean, he had to pass quite a bit of strong riders. So no, I didn't expect him to do what he did, but when he did and how he did it, I mean, that was just finger licking good.
I love this because what gets overlooked here is if you're Aprilia and you're choosing his tire pressure, what tire pressure do you choose? Leading.
Good point.
I'm going to lead. And he's mired down in the pack and they're following each other. And just like some of the rays were like I'm being like melted by the exhaust coming off the bike, half a meter in front of me, which is if you get any further off than that, then the guy behind you is all over you at the first possible instant. Because they're like, oh, no, I'm not going to get detached from this chain. I'm going to go right through. If you can't keep up, I'm going to keep up. So he's fighting that battle. And I know, and this is the thing, and Jules pointed out, you're watching his progress and he's going nowhere. But when I thought about it later, I'm like, oh, I understand what's going on. He's having to stabilize his front tire pressure before he can really begin to use the full power of his bike to start to make overtakes. And this is really what we saw. It was a couple of laps, maybe almost to the halfway. And then suddenly every lap, just relentlessly up a place. But even at the halfway point, even at the 2/3 point, you're looking at the time, you're like, I don't know. How is he going to catch him? How is he going to catch him?
Time was running out fast because he left it until there was only 6 laps to go when he finally gets into second. And he nails Raul Fernandez to get into second, and he was a full 2.1 seconds behind Aldeguer, who was not hanging around. Aldeguer is not hanging around at all. He's got arguably the second best pace this weekend. And then in under 3 laps, he's got it down to under a second. And then going on to the last lap, I actually didn't think he was going to do it. I didn't think he was going to do it at all. And he did it into the corner where we've seen Marquez get it wrong and punt Rins off. His move, I thought it was going to be another Rins situation, Jules. He come from 30 meters back.
It looked very opportunist. I mean, but that he did it, I thought that, oh man, this is what we need from Bezzecchi, to make that step in mindset to really kill it. And not I'm pretty happy riding second. That's better than I do most of the weekends. No. You are on maybe the best bike, the best rideable bike of the whole pack now. You've been amazing during the qualifying. Come on and send it, and make it count and reward yourself for all the hard work you've been pretty much doing all on your own this season. So that was great to see.
And let's review. He's worked up to this. He's gone from settling to legitimately saying to Marc Marquez, oh, no, you don't. I'm coming right back through. And now he's at a track where he's got what he knows has got to be his most dominant margin all season long with this bike. And he's got Aldeguer, a rookie, a very talented rookie, but absolutely a rookie lined up. And as someone with that level of experience, you are not letting a rookie finish ahead of you. And the move that impressed me, and I don't know if we have a move of the year, but this might come pretty close to qualifying for move of the year. It's not just that he took him up the inside, but that when Aldeguer came back, he just kept the throttle and stayed ahead of him on the outside of the next turn. And that was when I was just like, my wife was like, "Why are you shouting at the TV?" I'm like, did you not just see what Bezzecchi did there? It was just staggering display of ridership and just racing, and just such good racing between the two of them as well. And yeah, I'm getting goosebumps all over again. Sorry.
It's brilliant because, Aldeguer tried to come back at him and he was like, no, it's like my first win's going to be slipping away. And he was like, oh no, I'm going to have it. But in the end, Bez, he pulls it off, and amazing. You could see how ecstatic he was. What an epic finish. I was leaping off the sofa. I couldn't believe it. It was absolutely brilliant. So Aldeguer, very well-deserved second. And Raul Fernandez, an amazing third place in his first podium. And he looked happier than both the winners. That's one of the happiest podiums I think I've seen. Although Aldeguer, you saw how destroyed the riders were with the heat afterwards. Although Aldeguer looked gutted until he realised, that was quite good though, and I was in second, and Fernandez was absolutely amazingly happy as well. So there was one little note after the race. Marini lost his P6 due to a front tyre pressure. That stupid rule, unfortunately, which promoted Marc Marquez up to 6. And this is something that I thought was going to come into Sunday as well. So Mark dropped down to 13th, and he made more moves than almost all sort of Bez and come back through the field and actually had really strong pace in the end. So I was like, oh, maybe he will play a factor on Sunday. So he inherited P6, but this all sets up what was going to be a dramatic and bruising race on the Sunday. Right, so as ever, with our race reviews, we like to break down into some major points. And we've got a few points to talk about. And we're not going to talk about the one you think we might talk about first. Everyone's talking about the crash, but we've got a new Grand Prix winner. Fantastic Firmin. Wow, after the Bezzecchi thing, we'll talk about that in a minute. He basically has a wide open goal. He'd been the second fastest all weekend. But wow, Jules, that was dominant, and a dominant display of mental ability, I thought, as well.
Definitely, because imagine leading your first. Don't think it was the first time he led a race, because I think he led for a bit at Le Mans in the rain race.
When he stayed out. Yeah.
But to lead a race and genuinely think like I could win this, no special circumstances. I mean, he led from lap 7 onwards, so that's 20 laps to go, and to lead that race, and to 20 laps to think like, okay, I can be the one to make a mistake as well, as so many riders this weekend had made mistakes, lost their fronts, went off, went wide, and he afterwards said like, I was constantly expecting Marco Bezzecchi to come from behind, and because obviously he knew from Saturday like, man, he's gonna come for me again with the speed he has. So there must have gone so much through his head, but he rode it looked like he was riding so comfortably, so effortlessly almost, and it didn't look like he was panicking at all. And I think that for a rookie, and also his age, because he's only just turned 20. Man, I thought that was really, really impressive. And all of a sudden, we understand why Ducati gave him that contract.
And that's what a lot of people have been saying about him. And yeah, if you've ever done any kind of racing and you've had a lead, especially if you've had it for a while, you understand that little demon that perches on everyone's shoulder and is like, don't screw it up, don't screw it up, don't screw it up. And the people who don't have that demon, or who can effectively silence it, those are the people who like to be in front. And they're a rare breed of person. But my understanding, without following his Moto2 career, is he won a lot of races. When he won, he was well away from everybody. So This, I think, is his wheelhouse mentally. He's someone, if you put him alone on a track, he will just spend hours hitting that exact apex, hitting that exact braking marker, time after time, just half a tenth, a hundredth apart, lap after lap after lap. And we saw that prowess on full display. The other thing I want to say is his style of riding that bike doesn't really suit that bike a lot of times, which is why I think we've seen Alex also on the Gresini being the main competitor to Mark. He has an unusual ability to carry corner speed, whereas the Ducati is all about the heavy braking zones and on traction as soon as possible. But at this track, without a lot of braking zones, very greasy, low grip, an ability to carry a high amount of corner speed is exactly what you need, especially if you have the engine to then propel you onwards. And it was a perfect match of the circuit, his natural ability, and then, of course, the lottery ticket of what happened slightly further back on the first lap.
Yeah, and also the hard heat-resistant casing
Tire.
rear tyre, because when did we last use it? Austria. And who was really good at Austria and finished second, pushing Marc Marquez all the way?
Yep.
It was Firmin Aldeguer. And also with very slippery conditions, Jules mentioned it, Le Mans. He was stunning at Le Mans and got his first podiums in Le Mans in slippy conditions. And another thing to follow on from you there, Matt, about his strange abilities is also, and Marc Marquez has come out and said this, he is the best Ducati rider at tyre wear and managing when it's slippy, at managing the rear tyre. And that is just an innate sort of like a natural ability that he has. And this is amazing. So one thing I liked that he said about this after the race was, because if you think back to 2023 and Jorge Martin had this race won, and this is arguably what lost him the championship. He had this race won, he had a huge lead and binned it in an unforced error because he said he backed off and was cruising. And Firmin said that he was thinking about this every lap, thinking about Jorge Martin and that same mistake. So he kept pushing and he was still banging in low 30s. I think, and still pulling away, and ended up winning by I think it was almost 7 seconds in the end. And that's scary because I've been out in the lead in races before, and I'm a wuss. I back right off and go wibbly wobbly and don't want to do stuff. So staying on it and keeping focused is really, really impressed. Top Ducati all weekend. I mean, what else can we say about him? He spanked Alex Marquez. He spanked all the other Ducatis. Absolutely amazing. And surely this is the first of many to come from him. And Jules mentioned it. That's right. Ducati gave him this contract before he'd even started his Moto2, his proper Moto2 championship sort of campaign, and he was expected to win it and didn't. Matt pointed out he won lots of races and dominated some races, but there's quite a lot of people questioning Ducati's decision here, and I think he has proven that he's very much worth it. So shall we move on? Shall we move on to the to the incident then? So obviously at the start of the race, there was a big bit of controversy, I think is the wrong word because of how they handled it. But wow, Jules, what do you make of the Marco Bezzecchi from hero to zero on the Sunday? Very unfortunate.
It was, at first glance, I thought, this is, how could he misjudge his own pace and ride into the back of Marquez? And then afterwards, and I think a lot of people on socials already saw this by the TNT crew, they had this really good analysis explanation of how Bezzecchi in the turn before he hit Mark kind of lost his rear. The rear then snapped back into into line. He had more grip because he was already on the flatter side of his tire, therefore got more speed. But even then, still, I mean, how can you misjudge it? But on the other hand, this happens in like a second or something, you know?
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just so hard. But I mean, it looked like he was like, okay, are you going to do the overtake or are you backing out, you know? And then it was none of those two, and it had the worst kind of outcome.
Yeah, and this is the thing. It looked like It looked like he was about to try and overtake. When you just first saw it, you're like, oh, he thought he was gonna, he was gonna brace up Mark on the outside and take that position. And it was really only after I saw like the second or third replay, I'm like, hang on, something's weird about his entry to this turn. I thought it was maybe a gear shift because I hadn't seen the TNT. I thought it was like maybe gear shift unsettled the bike. But fundamentally what you had, and Jules described it very well, is, and who did we talk about doing this yesterday in the sprint? Marc Marquez. Because he lost the rear, he squared the bike up. And where he squared the bike up was essentially on a much shorter curve than the racing line. So he was inside of everybody, carrying the same, if not more speed. You're traveling a shorter distance, even at the same rate of speed, you're going to make up ground. And what killed him is he was very quick to realize the problem. But when he let off the throttle, he essentially developed the motorcycle equivalent of understeer. And you can see him on the bike as it's starting to drift outward, and he's seeing Mark come over this way. So his reaction was exactly what anyone would do, but it actually drove him the opposite direction than he needed to be going to avoid the collision. And you say a second, that slide, man, that was like that was well under a tenth. And I will just remind anyone who doesn't know anything about human reaction times, if you're reacting to a situation, you're talking about 3.5 tenths to really properly react to it if you didn't expect it in advance. So yeah, no, it looked bad. It was clearly his mistake because he lost the rear. But I was not convinced at all he was ever trying to make an overtake once I looked at it carefully.
I actually think he was, for a split second, trying to, because he was fast through there all weekend. And there's a little caveat here that I don't think I've seen anyone else sort of like mentioned really. In the warm-up, Mark said this, he found something in the warm-up and was super, super fast, and especially on used tyres. And I think Bez knew this. And when Bez made another complete hash of the start again, he was like, I think he was thinking, because I thought initially when I saw this crash, I was like, why was he so desperate? Why was he pushing so hard on the first lap when you've got so much overpace? I think he was like, I need to get ahead. I can't let Mark get in front of me. I need to get ahead of Mark quick because Mark's found something. And Mark said himself that he was actually quietly confident for the race. He'd actually found a bit of pace. So I think Bez for a split second was like, I'm super fast in here. I can do the move. And before you'd even kind of get through thinking about it, it was too late. It wasn't anyone else being slow. It was Bez being too fast. And then it was just a bit of a clumsy mistake. Didn't react in time. It was really hard it's really unfortunate. It was really hard for him to react in time. And then this target fixation when he could either lean the bike even more, probably lose the front and wipe Mark out, or he could try to pick it up and save it. It was just, he was doomed. He was doomed if he did. He was doomed if he didn't. And it was really unfortunate. Obviously for Mark, wouldn't have had a clue what was going on. He would have felt an impact. And this is the bit in here which is a bit annoying. So yes, Bez made a mistake and he owned it, but it was nothing malicious. It was just one of these things. And actually, funnily enough, we'll get on to how the incident was handled, but we'll do this now. Alex Marquez sort of semi-defended him and said, look, it's the end of it. It's Mark's brother. He said, look, this is a long season. We're tired. People make small mistakes. And his mistake, a minuscule mistake, it was just a slight misjudgment and the consequence didn't really fit the crime at all. And it would have been absolutely fine if that gravel trap wasn't massively raised up. And you see, wow, the impact Mark had on his right shoulder on that thing. As soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh no, oh dear, because it's on the right, the injured arm and the injured shoulder. It's like, oh dear, this is bad. And you knew it instantly. He was not getting up. And what was not really thing, I think Bez was also knocked out. I've seen on social media a fan footage from the inside of the track. Bez was laying motionless for ages before he actually got up and moved. I think Bez was knocked out because he ended up having an egg beater of a crash as well, all caused by this massive gravel trap. And I can't believe this has been missed by the Safety Commission because this horribly, Matt, this reminds me back of, I think it's 1993, and Wayne Rainey at Misano, when they went the proper way around, ended his career and paralysed himself because he had a slightly sort of innocuous sort of like crash, but it was a massive raised curve and the rumpy gravel trap which he barrel rolled through, which ended up breaking his spine and paralyzing him. And it's just terrifying to see this, and it shouldn't happen.
I agree. I'm not sure who does the homologation for FIM. I assume is the organization, or Dorna. But whoever does, they need to revise that, because you can't have people sliding at 160, 180 kilometers an hour into a raised curb. It just is not good. The curb threw Bezzecchi off the bike, and you could see I actually had a injury kind of similar to that from being thrown off of my bike at around 40, 50 kilometers an hour straight over the handlebars. And I saw how he came down. I'm like, oh, when they started talking about ligament damage, I'm like, oh yeah, I think I know the one they're talking about, because I saw how he landed. But he got chucked up into the air. He had so much. You have so much. Crashing a bike like that is a really good object lesson in how much we really are not in control of our physical universe. How much you're constantly being
Yeah.
acted on forces. Like, you get chucked up off of a bicycle, you're like, oh, there's like, oh, that's what gravity is. Oh, that's what momentum is. Like, you have no power over this whatsoever. And he just got whipped up into the air by that curb. And the way he came down, well, we know now, I think he's missing at least 2 races, but yeah,
Yeah, that's the thing.
ugh.
It was just so needless because the gravel, you keep saying curb, and it's probably right. The gravel acted as a curb, essentially. That's what it was. It said, well, because these are stones. You hit something hard, like water, it can't move out of the way in time, and it essentially acts like a solid object. And it's gone down. And you see there was footage. It looked like, I originally thought it dislocated his shoulder because he tries to pop it back in. Just before we've gone on to record now, we've had an injury update, and I'm going to butcher this name. So I apologize for anybody who are anatomically minded, but it's the coracoid process fracture, which is a bizarre name for a bone, I think, but it's just in the collarbone near the shoulder blade. And when Mark himself, when he left the circuit, said, I think I've broken the ligaments, which is bad news, because that's several months if you've done ligaments. But this bone is where a lot of the ligaments around the shoulder joint attach to, and he's broken that bone, which is why when you see him try to pop the shoulder in, it seems to just drop back down again. I've had a very similar injury in my thumb where I pulled the UCL ligament off and it just wasn't attached to anything. I pulled it off with a bit of bone. So these things can be healed much easier than an actual broken ligament, which is good to know. And there's no need for surgery. So yeah, Matt's already sort of alluded to it. He's definitely going to miss the next 2 rounds at Phillip Island and at Sepang, which I think he's gutted about missing Phillip Island because I think he was going to destroy everyone there, but he doesn't like Sepang, so I don't think he's too bothered about missing that. And maybe Portugal. I think it's on the 9th of November. So he's got like a month to get fixed. But yeah, so really unfortunate. But one thing I really want to touch on there was how this whole thing has been handled. It was massive grace. You see Bezzecchi, when he actually got up and you could see on the side of the track, walked straight over to Mark. He's holding his arms and they kind of shook hands and it was like, it's fine. And then Mark gave an interview afterwards. I don't know how he could be so calm and sort of smiley talking in interviews afterwards when clearly he's still in a lot of pain. And said it was matter of fact, said Bezzecchi had already gone and apologised. It was fine. These things happen. Mistakes happen. And then did a social media post because, of course, Jules fans lose their mind online, and Mark come out and said, please, no hard feelings towards Marco. No one does it on purpose. So he did it the previous day and was like probably got a bit of a abuse, but not. But I think the way that they both handled this, and Marcos said put an apology out, I think that can set an example, and certain other former champions could really take a lot of learning from this.
Definitely. Also because we all know Bezzecchi is from the VR46 camp. He's in Valentino Rossi's team. And you could already see the messages going back and forth between those two fan
They've got
bases.
history as well.
Yes, indeed. Although Bezzecchi, I think nowadays keeps himself far away from that sentiment, but I think was really classy and smart also by Mark putting that message out pretty soon and try to remove the needle from it all. And as far as we know, it's done its job.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt.
I was just going to go on and say it's sort of amazing to me that this is like the toxic residue of something that happened over a decade ago at this. This is very Capulets and Montagues-esque, if you will.
Again, nice.
And ah, first of all, I love how classy the two of them were in the moment, especially Marquez, because when you're the aggrieved person, it's very easy to be wound up, and it can take a minute to just collect yourself. And he knew immediately that it was not an intentional move to take him out, or
Oh, yeah.
he knew it immediately. And even though he was injured, like that alone, but then to be on top of it from a social media point of view, but also I'm going to hand it to Bezzecchi because you mentioned he did come up in the VR46 world, and I believe at one point he had some kind of beef with Marquez, but very
Yep.
clearly he has grown up enough to get on with his life and get over it, and the two of them now have a much more solid relationship. And
Yep.
this, on track, yeah, absolutely. But I like that they can be classy and respectful like that, sort of that old school. Yeah, I might try and murder you on the track, but off the track, I'll buy you a beer.
Mhm.
And it's
Absolutely.
good to see.
Yeah, Bez said it himself, I think, earlier in Mazzano. Was like, I've matured quite a lot, because I think they had beef back in 2023, and Bez made some pretty horrible comments about Marquez. But again, I think that was all born out of the VR46 Academy and the
Yeah, I mean,
feud.
it
He
just
caught up with it.
yeah.
And I think Mark at the time said, I think he'll grow up and regret those sort of comments. And they kind of have. And him and Bez have been having a great relationship this year, and some great battles and a lot of respect there. So it was brilliant from both of them to see how it was, absolutely to see how it was handled. And say what you want about Marc Marquez, he dishes it out. He's dished out a few rough and dirty moves, but he never complains when someone does it to him. It's like he dishes it out, but he accepts it as well when it comes back. So there's a saying, yeah, don't dish it out if you can't take it back, sort of thing. And he's never, if you don't like him, but you can never deny that he always takes it on the chin when someone does a rough move for him. And I think in his head, he was like, oh, I can cash that one in. I could do a rough move on Bez now in a couple of years, maybe, and cash this one in. So anyway, we'll move on. Surely, unfortunately for Bezzecchi, because we're thinking Phillip Island's coming up in a couple of weeks. Thankfully, he has no fractures, but surely Phillip Island is going to suit that Aprilia something rotten, because it is lots of fast corners, and it's basically Aprilia land, but he's surely going to get a double long lap penalty, I would imagine. It's been deferred because, of course, he had to go to hospital, Jules. And same thing in Jorge Martin. We haven't had a hearing on him yet, because he hasn't managed to sit down with the stewards. Although the steward is Simon Crapar, and he doesn't really like Marc Marquez that much, but I'm pretty sure Bez is going to get a penalty for this.
You'd expect him to, and how harsh that may sound. I mean, they need to be consistent with this, as consistent as they can be. I hope it will just be one long lap, and I kind of forgot
Yeah, I agree.
what the long lap in Phillip Island is like, where it's situated, because
It's round the outside of the right-hand hairpin after Stoner Corner, so turn 4. I believe it's round the outside of
yeah.
that. I think it's quite bad. So I think it's going to be at least 2-3 seconds.
Yeah, I vaguely remember Morbidelli having one last season, which shouldn't surprise us. But yeah, I think that's a bad one. This weekend was all right to have a long lap. Yeah, that's a bad one.
So pardon me for saying this, but yeah, you have to get a penalty for that, even if it was unintentional, even if he never meant to overtake him. At the end of the day, you went into the corner, you lost control of your bike, and the end result was you took somebody out for multiple races. That's a penalty. I don't think Bezzecchi will have any problem with that. And were the roles reversed, we would expect to see the exact same thing. However, did you say Phillip Island was Aprilia land? Could Bezzecchi be
Yes, I
on
did.
pole? Could he then get a long lap and have to fight back through the whole race? Oh,
Ooh, yeah.
tragedy, tragedy. Oh, it's just I feel so bad. I'm so sorry, Bezzecchi. You're gonna have to take a penalty from pole position and then fight through the whole race to try and win it. That's just it's gonna ruin it for all of us viewers.
Yep, so basically what you're saying is he's just done us a massive favour because he's eliminated Mark for 2 races now and is penalised himself, and he's probably going to be the favourite, I think, going to Phillip Island. He's basically just made us, we've got 2 potentially really exciting races coming up now. But yeah, we really wish Mark will come back soon. He should maybe be wise. I think this time he is going to be wise and listen to the doctors and not rush back because, hey, he's already got the championship wrapped up and, well, thank goodness for him as well. They actually did get the championship wrapped up already. And I think maybe that's why he was so totally cool about it. I think if the championship was still online, he may not have been so cool about it. But anyway, unfortunate for Bez as well, it needs to be said that he should really be P3 in the championship now. He had such an advantage this weekend. And this is why I find it a bit frustrating, for him that he didn't really need to panic that much or just make this mistake. Obviously, he didn't want to, but he had such a pace advantage. And with Bagnaia having a mare and slipping off, he would have been ahead of Bagnaia in the points now because it's assumed he was going to win. I think he would have hunted Aldeguer down and won. He's now 20 points back from Bagnaia, still though with the momentum. But if you'd like to give us a bit of momentum, why don't give us a like and subscribe on YouTube? Or if you're an audio listener only, then maybe give us a favourable rating on your podcast platform of choice. Perhaps you'd like to tell us how wrong we are or give some feedback, or maybe if you have some ideas of some off-season content. It's rapidly approaching. The end of season is nigh. We have some great ideas and some stuff in the pipeline for some off-season content. But if there's something in particular that you'd like us to do, then you can send us an email. So email us at mrapexmoto@gmail.com. That's mrapexmoto, all one word, @gmail.com. Right, let's go on to our third topic because, again, as usual, we ramble on far too much. And I want to talk about Acosta a little bit. He's a lovable menace, isn't he, Jules?
He was maybe, well, he wasn't the rider in best shape, but because of course we had Bezzecchi, but he looked like on the Saturday like he was the only one who could threaten Bezzecchi. And he had been very, very fast during the Friday and the Saturday sessions, starting P2 from the top of my mind. So he had all the papers to be the one to if anything would happen to Marco Bezzecchi, that he would be there to take what was coming to him, because we now know what Aldeguer did, but the Ducatis, until the races started, were struggling. So, man, it's just it's with Acosta. So many times you think like this is gonna be his big breakthrough, because we've been watching him for almost 2 seasons now, and we all feel like he's the next big thing. He's the guy to be the next Marquez or whatever. But somehow, like he crashed out of that sprint, totally needless to do that.
As usual, that's become norm, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, and that's such a shame, because I don't want to like compare is also is always difficult. But I was thinking yesterday while I was cooking my meal after the race, well, not straight after because that would be very early to cook a meal, but like later on, I thought like, who had the most impressive rookie season? I mean, we all saw Acosta last year, but if you see what Aldeguer did, he won a Grand Prix already.
He has, Matt, but that was an amazing defense for P2.
Yeah, I'll tell you what it reminded me of. It was like this old-timey boxing matches where you'd get the first person in the ring, and if they won, the next person would get in, and the person who won would just stay in the ring till they finally lost. That was like Acosta in the Grand Prix. Just, who am I fighting now? Is it Marquez? Is it Fernandez? Is it Marini? I'll take anybody on. But what I love about him, and where you keep on being unhappy he crashes out in the sprint. But to me, the tactic is always the same. There's just not as many points in a sprint. And I, as Acosta, am going to put my bike as close to the leader as I can. I'm going to stay there until my tires go, and I'm going to go backwards as little as possible. And if I crash out, it's a sprint. I don't lose that much, But if it works 1 out of every 4 races, I gain more points than if I'm just delicate with my tires and finish in 9th or 10th, which is probably really about where that bike deserved to finish on the Saturday. On the Sunday, though, yeah, no, he demonstrated everything that we wanted to see, everything that we thought we saw when he first showed up last season, which is just basically alien with absolutely no sense of self-preservation whatsoever. It didn't matter who you were, how you came past him. He just came back. And it was
Brilliant. He just lets the brakes off and
Yeah,
just like,
yep,
nope,
yep.
I'm not having it. And he just fought straight back. And that should have killed, like, because you're right, mate. You'd think the tyres are going to go and it's a lost cause. But it wasn't, because he kept fighting back so much. And then when it got to lap 18, he suddenly finds some pace and starts doing personal best laps. And it absolutely paid off. But it gave us some brilliant drama. Like, everyone he got near, he was just like, nope. It was like 1 or 2 corners later, he was just desperately late on the brakes.
Yeah, and you couldn't believe watching him, because you did, like, you said something about those tires stabilized when the bike got that light in the last portion of the race, whatever, maybe his front tire pressures came down finally a little bit because they were enough tread off of the tire that it began to lose some heat. I don't know what it was, and the engineers know what it was, but his ability to stay with everyone who tried to come past him, except for Aldeguer. And even there, he made Aldeguer work too. It was not like, I mean, he stayed with them till his tires went off. And then nobody, I thought for sure Fernandez, somebody, Marini would get round him and go. But no, he was just like, he was so tenacious in his defense. And yet you could see him just looking up the road and going, man, if I'd had that bike, I'd have won 10 Grand Prix already. And I don't think he'd be wrong about that.
Yeah, I thought that was really Acosta unlike the way he managed that race, because we've come to know him as very erratic sometimes, impatient. But the way he managed his tires and just doing enough to keep everyone behind, because at one point in the first phase of the race, he had like 2 or 3 bikes behind him. But then, like, past the halfway point, it was like almost the whole field except Chantra, who
Yeah.
packed up behind him, and it was like, I mean, it was just
like choo-choo all aboard the Acosta train.
yeah, it was just like you're waiting for him to, like, drop massively. But then I think Matt has a really good point there. As the bike got lighter and he saved his tire enough to then make it really start working for him, and when you wouldn't have given a lot of your money for him to finish on the podium, he then just switched on, and it was really a joy to watch, to see a race with so many different faces. And it was pretty much, I mean, as amazing as Aldeguer was, I mean, the extra flavor of this race was from Acosta.
Yeah, and Matt, that's why I was calling him like a lovable menace, because it seems like he was just being a menace for the hell of it, and his tire was going to drop and went back, but he had to use the medium, obviously, but it never did. He actually managed it well for once.
Yeah, and I guess hats off to Michelin, because they brought enough tires that would work for a lot of different, but all the KTMs ran medium. They ran softs in the sprint race. So that clearly was able to cope with the demands that the KTM put on them. But then some of the people he was racing, I think Fernandez was soft medium. I think the Quartararo, interestingly, ran the hard tire because it was the only one hard. He ran hard soft. And then Rins, going the other direction, ran soft. So we had everybody with a compound that let them feel comfortable. But you're right. The where this race was at was, nice job, Aldeguer. But 2 through 10, 2 through 12, within like a second of each other for how many laps in a row? Man, you just don't see that very often in MotoGP. But wow, it was great. It was fantastic. There's constant just churn and motion, and one tiny mistake, say Marini and Fernandez, and you go from 3rd to 9th. Like, you're just spat out the back if you make the tiniest mistakes. It must have been so mentally draining on all the riders.
It was like a Moto3 race. And yeah, you mentioned Marini there, which is good because Marini arguably should have finished second. And he tried so many times to make the move stick on Acosta, and he couldn't. And Acosta kept getting through. And you would have thought at the end, like, because then Marini got caught up a bit with Raul Fernandez and got a massive battle, and they had a bit of what was going on in the last corner, which blew it all wide open. But you would have thought, I thought Marini was going to be quite frustrated at the end and just be like, Acosta was letting the brakes off and going through. He actually praised Acosta and said he defended so well and drove and rode such an amazing race. So let's wrap that up and get on to our honourable mentions now. And let's talk about Marini and Honda, because could have been P2, but he didn't. He made the stick. He had front tyre pressure issues again in the race, he said, as well, and he was coming back. But the Honda, man, the Honda is doing good. He should have been P6 in the sprint, but he wasn't. He lost it because of the stupid tyre pressure rule. But the Honda was good as Marini. Mir had his customary crash now, almost after his penalty. He can't have 2 podiums in a row, no way. But Mir binned it. But Matt, Honda again looking great this weekend, and Marini in particular.
Yeah, they have been rummaging through the spare parts bin, and they finally found some that fit together and make the bike work, I guess would be the story that people would tell you. But what they have done is they've been able to absolutely optimize the engine and the package that they started the season with. And the developments have come maybe more slowly than some people might have wanted, but when they've come, they've worked. And that is so crucial overall. But this was, again, and you could think about Zarco at Le Mans. Again, you have a slippy surface, you've got unusual tires, and just everything playing right into what is kind of their wheelhouse right now. And it's, but I expect a lot more from Honda. They clearly are on the up.
Well, this is positive, Jules, because this couldn't have been a more sort of different circuit to Motegi, and Honda were looking good again, like different tire construction and everything, and they seem to be pretty decent everywhere now.
And that's a huge gain for them, because they were awful on straight line speed last season. It was just almost ridiculous. But it seems to me, like we already said last week after they did so well at Motegi, that they have built a pretty complete bike, and they've made the best of the concessions that they have. I mean, you need to do really bad to have as much concessions as they have had, but they really made them count. And it's almost a shame that we only have 1 year of these regulations, because they just starting to get there. And I think one big compliment to them is that they actually seem to beat Yamaha right now, and that must be really painful for Yamaha.
Yes, it is, because actually, let's talk about Yamaha as well, because Alex Rins, we haven't had a chance to talk about him for ages, and he was doing so well in second for so long. But as Matt said, he was running softs, and he barbecued his rear tire, I think, Matt, and just plummeted.
And hats off, because I'll be honest, being a recent full-time follower of the sport, Alex Rins was just that guy at the back who would crash annoyingly in Quali 1 so that my rider didn't get a lap. And, he's there. Obviously, Yamaha like him. He must have something. And then he shows up to this race on the soft tire. And about halfway through the race, he just, I can't remember if he was taking advantage, but it was another battle. And he just zipped all the way up to Acosta. And within a lap, he was by Acosta. And you're watching him on this Yamaha. Now, you talk about the Honda not having straight line speed. Oh, my goodness. That Yamaha looked like it was powered by like 2 gerbils and a Sparrow. I've never seen a weaker engine on a MotoGP. And Acosta would look like he'd have him. He'd be fully alongside into the turn. And then Acosta would just go backwards, and Rins would be like, oh, you're braking now? I'm going to brake like 100 meters later. And he would just get it turned in somehow. I was actually so impressed by him on the brakes in those conditions, even with the soft tire, which I know gives an advantage. His ability to just use that to stay ahead and to really put a little pressure on Acosta until he had no tire left. It was just, I'm so glad he did that instead of just sort of babying his tires and just finishing ahead of Quartararo. It was so much better to see. It was fantastic. And I hope Yamaha appreciates that, because I have a feeling skills like that with the new regulations might be maybe a little more useful than they've been with all this aero and stuff.
Maybe it's the only strength that Yamaha have really, is like braking at the moment, I think, and really good. And he fully took advantage of that. What also he took advantage of was a massive battle between another person that I want to talk about, and that's Raul Fernandez getting his first podium in the sprint. Very fighty, but it was that massive battle between him and Marini going into the last corner, getting very, very feisty, and they had their fairings and wheels had a rather intimate conversation going into the final corner, and that kind of pretty much ruined Marini's race, really. It was very fighty. I don't think it was either of their faults, really, but it was great to see Raul Fernandez up there. He's been coming stronger and stronger and stronger, and nice one for him as well. He said after the sprint that he credited a lot of it to Davide Brivio and Trackhouse and his manager getting his head in the right place, sitting him down and talking to him and basically giving him a bit of a kick up the arse, I think, but in a nice way and supportive way, and it actually seems to work. So it's really good to see Raul Fernandez coming on strong, and that was brilliant. So let's move on to the standings then. Let's wrap it up there. And what's quite interesting in the standings now is Acosta's come up into P5 now. He's jumped the VR46 guys, but Fermin Aldeguer is only 10 points behind Fabio Di Giannantonio now. And we didn't have a chance to talk about it today, but the two VR46 boys, they've had a bit of a falling out. Di Giannantonio was not happy with Frankie Morbidelli and his riding at all. That's the second time this year, so there's a bit of inter-team beef going on there. But let's get on to the beefy bit, shall we? Let's wrap this up. As you always, we like to give some awards. Matt, who was your rider of the weekend?
Well, it's because it's the weekend. Like, it's hard for me to not say who I want to say, but it's the whole weekend. Oh, man. Fine. Be that way. Aldeguer, of course. Obviously. He almost won the sprint. He smashed the Grand Prix. He didn't drive a lot of the drama. But if we're talking about the whole weekend, the boy delivered, and at a pretty young age. He just missed out being the youngest sprint winner ever. So, chapeau.
Yeah,
nicely done.
Good one. He actually is the second youngest Grand Prix winner of all time behind his mentor, Marc Marquez. And it was quite close. So, and that was actually the last round he could have got that accolade as well. So, nice one. Jules, who was your rider of the weekend?
I'm going Luca Marini. We kind of talked about him already, but it was such a difficult weekend on the green track that Mandalika was. Top the Friday first session, be on the front row with the Honda, and delivering a good fight on the Sunday. So special shout out to him.
Yep, nice one. And my one, I'm going to go for Raul Fernandez. We were just talking about him, and I don't think he's had enough love this year. So moments of the weekend. I'm going to actually set Matt last here so we can't steal everyone else's. Jules, what was yours?
Then I'm going for the Bezzecchi overtake on Aldeguer in the in the final phase of the last lap of the sprint.
Okay, I'm going to go for. Well, I can't give Matt an easy one because he steals everyone. I'm going for my moment of the weekend was the Bezzecchi Marquez incident and the subsequent injury, because I think that's got big ramifications. Matt, what's yours?
Honestly, pick your rider versus Pedro Acosta on the Sunday. Like literally just Acosta. The entire defense of P2 across the whole Grand Prix was just... It was spectacular. You know what? I will give it to you. I'll give it to you. Maybe it was those few laps where Rins was out breaking him. Those were so much fun to watch. But really, Acosta didn't get a mention and a rider of the weekend. He was on a KTM that probably didn't quite deserve to finish where it finished.
Yeah, good point.
And not only did he take them on, but even the people who suffered the most were like, yeah, no, man, that was just fun. Wow, that kid can ride a bike. And nicely done, Acosta, defending your P2.
Fair play, fair play. What also would be nicely done is if you go and follow my panel. Jules, where can people get you?
You can find me on Blue Sky. The handle is Jules on Racing.
Cool. Matt, where can people get you?
At MattPT55 on pretty much all your socials.
Marvelous. And why don't you go and give us a subscribe and a like on YouTube or your desired podcast platform. We'll be back again in 2 weeks to review round 19, the Australian Grand Prix from the brilliant Phillip Island. As always, thanks for listening to Missed Apex MotoGP.